In today's midweek message, we're going to be going through a Bible story that we've read recently in our Bible in a Year program. Specifically, we're going to talk about Rachel stealing the household gods from her father Laban. So here's the setup. Laban is the brother of Rebekah, who became the wife of Isaac. And Laban seems to be this patriarch of his family, and we see some information about him. We learn about him when Isaac comes searching for a wife. He meets Rebekah and he brings her home. The story of the Bible continues, but the focus is mostly on Isaac and his side of the family. That is, until Isaac's son Jacob comes back to Laban's household to look for a wife for himself. Now, some trickery ensues, and Jacob wants to marry Laban's daughter Rachel, and he winds up accidentally marrying Leah, her sister, instead. There was some subterfuge on the part of Laban, but Jacob sticks around, and he also marries Rachel as well. Well, Laban turns out in the Bible to be this pretty slippery guy. He's not very honest, and Jacob winds up working for him for about 20 years. And it's really 20 years of Laban conniving, doing everything that he can to get the upper hand. But Jacob honors God, and because of that, God protects him and God blesses him. In fact, God blesses Jacob so much that Laban and his sons start to view him as a threat. And about that time, and this is Genesis chapter 31, God tells Jacob, it's time to pick up stakes and go. And so they take off without saying goodbye to Laban. But in Genesis chapter 31, verses 19 and 34, it tells us that when they slipped away, Rachel stole her father's household pagan gods. She took his idols, and she took them with them. Now, Laban chases them down. There's this confrontation, but Laban never does get his idols back, at least not what we can tell from the account that's written in the Bible. So this is an interesting story. It's an interesting piece of history, and we see a lot of logistical things happening here that are very important to the greater story of the early part of the Bible. But every time I read this, I'm always left with the question, why exactly did Rachel steal the idols? What was the point of that? Why did she do that? And of course, this is a question for the ages because the Bible doesn't come out and tell us the motivation that she had for doing this sort of thing. But we can use some speculation to make an educated guess on what exactly she was thinking or what she was doing. Now listen, speculating on some of these silent matters of the Bible is a fun thing to do, and it's not a particularly dangerous thing to do either, as long as we remember that these educated guesses we're making are just that, educated guesses. And we should never hang a major theological point on the support of our unsubstantiated speculation. So let's go ahead and do that now. Let's step out into the world of speculation and make a couple of educated guesses on what exactly the reason was for Rachel doing this sort of thing. Now, option number one, and there's a few different flavors of this, but this has been traditionally where most people have gravitated. This is the general answer that most scholars will tell you. And the guess is that Rachel had some kind of sympathies for these gods. Now, we don't have a lot of information about what Rachel's life looked like when she was growing up, but clearly her father was a pagan worshiper, and at least he was during the time that we see him portrayed in the Bible, and it's unlikely to conclude or to guess that he was a worshiper of the true God until shortly before these events took place. He was most likely worshiping pagan gods for his whole life. And there is really no indication in the Bible at all that Laban worshiped the God of the Bible. There was one instance where he did show some respect to God, but even then that might be a little bit questionable. In Genesis chapter 31, verses 49 to 50, Laban invokes the name of God, the God of the Bible, in making a covenant with Jacob. But here he was most likely just making this covenant because he was afraid of Jacob, and so it would have been natural to invoke the name of Jacob's God when he made this covenant. We don't really know much more than that, but we can make a good educated guess here that he was a pagan to the core. Now, Rachel, as a result of being his daughter and growing up in this household, very likely may have had some sympathies toward these household gods. She might have had some sentimental attachment to these idols. They were most likely on full display in the household when she was growing up. Maybe that was a part of her youth that she enjoyed looking at them or enjoyed, whatever interaction she had with them. She might have had some sympathies or some feelings toward those idols, and so she stole them, brought them with her as sort of a way to hang on to some good feelings from her past. We don't know. There's also a very good chance that she may have worshipped those idols as well. She grew up in the pagan household. Most likely she was taught to worship those the same way her father was doing it. So there's a good chance that her sympathies toward these idols were that she was worshiping them, and she just might have still been worshiping those pagan gods while this story was taking place. It sounds pretty scandalous, but listen, it was not all that uncommon for Hebrews to do that sort of thing. We see this recurring sin happening again and again all throughout the Old Testament. And in fact, 20% of the Ten Commandments, the first two, are focused against doing this sort of thing, most likely because God knows the people were so inclined to do it. So there's a very good chance that she stole these idols because she had some type of connection to them, whether it was sentimental or religious. We don't know. That's just part of the guess. But there's also another option, a second one, and this one is much more intriguing, much more interesting. This is a new theory now, and it's stemming from what's called the Nuzi documents. Nuzi was an ancient Mesopotamian city, and there was an archaeological dig that took place at the site of Nuzi at the end of the 19th century and through about the middle of the 20th century. And at this excavation of Nuzi, archaeologists have uncovered more than 5,000 tablets that captured different snapshots of life at that place in that time. And they don't know how many tablets were actually there. Nobody even realized there were tablets coming out of that dig site until about 1925, when it was discovered that a lot of them were being sold on the black market in Baghdad. But of those 5,000 tablets, one of them gives us some insight that may shed some light into our story of what was going through Rachel's mind. And the tablet says this. It's just a snapshot, a fragment of something else that had happened. It said, "If Nashwi has a son of his own, he shall divide the state equally with Wulu. But the son of Nashwi shall take the gods of Nashwi. However, if Nashwi does not have a son of his own, then Wulu shall take the gods of Nashwi." So given this tablet, or given this interesting information that was on this tablet, many scholars think that there is a connection between the family inheritance, or the family estate being passed on. They believe that is connected with the passing on of the family idols. In other words, having been given the family gods by your parents would be a sign that you would be the one who should inherit the estate. Perhaps even you would claim the estate by presenting the family gods. That would prove that you were the rightful heir who the parents had chosen to receive that. And that's not really all that crazy of an idea when you think about it. In the pagan culture at that time, people would have been bowing down to their gods, asking for help with the crops, asking for help with the livestock, or whatever it is the family did. And when they were blessed, they would thank the gods. And so it would make sense that when the patriarch and matriarch of the family were ready to retire and move on, they would give the family idols to whoever it was that was going to be maintaining and continuing on with the estate. Perfectly logical, and not all that crazy to think that there could be a connection with our story here from Genesis. Now, we got to give a good caveat here, though, because the city of Nuzi, or the location of Nuzi, was in a different place than Laban and Rachel were. And also there were a few centuries that separated the time of Laban and Rachel and the time that Nuzi was thriving and these tablets were created. And so because of this, while the link between the passing on of family gods and the estate is an educated guess for how things worked in Nuzi, we have to recognize that it would be an even bigger educated guess to assume that it also worked that way with Laban and Rachel. But it might have. And if so, it might be that Rachel had no sentimental attachment to the family gods at all. She may never have bowed down and worshipped them a single time in her life. She might have simply been trying to steal the family's birthright. And that, my friends, would be an incredibly poetic coincidence, considering who her husband was and how he got his birthright. You can only imagine if there were reality TV shows that were around at the time of Laban and Rachel and Jacob, those three would have been the stars of it all. Hope this has been helpful. Hope it's been interesting. And until next time, Lord willing, there is a next time. May God bless you and your family.